Welcome on in, my Ashwings, to a little bit of a talking point today. As somebody who is really interested and involved in the commoner scene for Flesh and Blood, I wanted to have a little bit of a discussion in regards to how I feel that maybe we can see the format change, or if any changes need to be made at all. So I wanted to kind of take a quick look at everything that we have to do with commoner, talk about the woes that people are experiencing, but also the benefits, and really kind of allow ourselves to take a deep dive into what commoner is and why it exists overall, and should it even have a meta to begin with. So as we all know, with commoner, what commoner is it is a format in Flesh and Blood where your deck is comprised of up to 52 cards, including your hero, and you are in a young hero format. So no adult heroes, young hero format only. But everything inside your main deck, it has to be exactly 40 cards. And those 40 cards need to be commons. Everything that you present inside of a main deck in your commoner deck needs to be a common card or a card that was at some point printed in common. So that will determine that if it's got a downshift, if it was once a rare and it is now a common, it is now legal in commoner, regardless if you're running the rare version in your deck. And then your equipment and your hero must be of rare, common, or token rarity, and that's it. Those are the staples. That's the cutoff of everything. It's effectively 52 cards, full of bulk that you might have sitting around the house, and that's how you go about providing a commoner deck to somebody. Is just get all this stuff together. It's a nice bulk way to go about using your cards and playing Flesh and Blood at a very cheap rate. And that's good, right? We need something like that, as if it's whether it be a casual scene or even like a kitchen table competitive scene. We know how popular Pauper is in Magic the Gathering. I think like Grand Archive is getting something like this set up. I know like Pokemon and Yu-Gi-Oh have silly little formats like this too, and they help grow the game at a very budget level because people can just get their hands on these decks, people can find their favorite format, stick with it, and proceed to bring life to the format where other times it might be overshadowed by its more competitive counterpart, and in this case being Flesh and Blood's classic constructed format. We all know that at most of your LGSs, here in the States at least, you are probably going to see more and more people just doing classic constructed armories. They are not going to be commoner armories, they're going to be classic constructed. Now, in some situations, some LGSs have introduced a rotating schedule of sorts for the month, where you have 1 week classic constructed, 1 week commoner, 1 week draft, 1 week UPF or something, right? Whatever you want it to be. But that has added in a whole ton of value in regards to people having an opening to be able to play. Folks who don't believe they can compete in the classic constructed format can go and play in a draft and get their experience there and get a hold of a lot of their cards. People who believe the classic constructed format is too expensive can wait until the commoner nights when people can go out and play commoner at their locals instead for $20 a deck. So while commoner provides a great way for more players to get into the game for incredibly cheap and at a low skill level comparatively, is commoner in a bit of a bad situation right now? And what can we do as a community to change that situation? This is something that I wanted to always speak on because it's something I've kind of had in the lingering back end of my mind, that commoner oftentimes has been the same 3 to 5 decks that have done super well at competitive commoner events, right? And when I talk competitive, I'm saying these gold foil, and also previously before they were giving gold foil events or gold foils as prizing for the commoner events on things like callings and battle hardens and stuff like that. Before they were giving the commoner gold foil prize, they were giving away lore books for Flesh and Blood as the pricing. And those lore books tend to go for like $1,000 or something. So it's a pretty nice prize to get for playing in Commoner. The only downside is you only really ever get to play competitive in those Commoner events when you are at these big events. There are no Commoner 1Ks that happen. There are no Commoner 5Ks. There are no Commoner LGSs that are doing their own circuits and things like that. None of that is happening. The only time in which anybody is playing competitive Commoner is at a calling, a battle hardened, a pro tour, nationals, whatever it might be. That is when they are playing in the Commoner events and competing for very, very big prizing. So is there a reason to change anything? Right? Commoner does not get to see the same light of day as Classic Constructed does. We are very thankful that recently there was the Battle Hardened in Portland that had a Commoner event. It was a Commoner Battle Hardened, which was super cool and awesome to see, but in that same vein, we saw exactly what I had expected, as well as what several others have expected of Commoner, which is 5 to, really anywhere between 3 to 5 heroes that I had named personally pretty much. And those heroes making it to top 8, right? We have known that Ira, Icelander, Chain, and even in some cases Dash and Oldhim being the more prevalent fatigue-esque Guardian, those 5 heroes have done incredibly well across the format and continue to get new tools every single time their class comes out with a brand new set, such as Chain with Rosetta, or Icelander with Rosetta, or, if a new Mechanologist set comes out. I mean, even Bright Lights helped out Dash with giving her boom grenades and other things like that. So if these 5 heroes are pretty much the top of the leaderboard, right? What can we change for things? What can we see changed to allow for this meta to become a little bit more diverse in a format where only 5 heroes seem to reign? Now, obviously, I'm technically probably talking about 6 heroes because, as we all know, Enigma got a pretty big buff to her playstyle with the addition of the Blade Beckoner equipment that came out in the Hunted, a generic set of equipment that quite literally, and I'll show like a thing here, it pretty much just says, hey, if you are running weapons, I get to protect my Spectral Shield even more now, which is crazy. But Blade Beckoner equipment, really, really big because ninjas are pretty much the only thing that was like keeping her at bay. And for her to just run a whole set of equipment that essentially blocks 8 and then just continue to block with cards from hand, it's a completely different game. So with these heroes changing and adding and, new things happening, how do we get representation to other heroes that are not going to ever be at the same level, right? Because if we consider Commoner where it is right now, we had set 15 just drop being the Hunted. So we are 15 sets into the entire history of Flesh and Blood. And each one of them had continued to add small little things to different heroes to allow them to get even better throughout. Right? Viserai is significantly more playable than he was before Rosetta. Chain just got way better. Right? Chain is just the better Runeblade. Right? Take a look at Vincent. Vincent still does not have anything for her in Commoner, and frankly is still a dead in the water deck. There are several dead in the water decks, right? I mean, you're talking heroes like Kasai and Bolton and even if you really want to look at like Kavdane or whatever, you have Bravo, who originally was doing very well but has been taken over by other heroes, or most likely the Guardians are doing a more defensive package. You have Dash IO, which will never be better than Dash IE, I don't think. You have Max, who is just, again, like all those bad option there because you could just play regular Dash. You also have access to Teklevosen. If we want to talk about Teklevosen has no way to prevent arcane damage besides running a pair of Arcane Barrier, like the No Rune stuff, and therefore gets rid of his entire game plan of attaching Evos to himself. So Commoner is in a very weird spot. So what do we do? What can we do to change this format to become significantly more successful and to have more individuals and heroes be represented at these top tables with access to new tools? Well, this is where I've had a couple of things that I've wanted to bring up. And you let me know in the comments what you guys think about these. First, let's talk about adding rares to Commoner. Now, I know that I am a committee member of Clash, and effectively Clash is a fan-made format where we did that. We took the rares and any specializations and then just allowed you to play them inside that hero. This allowed for a more thematic way to play, and it also gave access to a lot more of those cards that kind of really add to the overall theme and style of gameplay for the hero. But even just adding rares is not, that's not Clash. I certainly don't want Clash to take over Commoner. But what I want is for Commoner to be the most diverse, interesting format. And you can do that by adding in rares. Adding in rares to Commoner is very simple. There are not too many rares that make it an insanely powerful thing. I personally have not done too much testing, but I believe the only rares that we really see that are like insane to think about are things like Count Your Blessings, Bonds of Ancestry, right? The outlying factors that we see happen in Blitz might be an issue in things like Commoner if those were to be added in. And of course, those can be taken care of as we see them go into metas and play things, but there's not a leaderboard. There's no leaderboard as to what hero is doing super well and how many times they've taken down a cold foil event and, who's got these points on what because of how they won and so on and so forth. There's no living legend for Flesh and Blood in Commoner. And because there's no living legend, we kind of just have to hope that we don't see another Ira, Icelander, or Enigma, or Chain in the top, or winning the event, because they're the only heroes that seem to do so. I see you, though, that I believe there was an individual who won the Prague Commoner Gold Foil event on Kano. I see you. Congrats on that. We need more things like that to where people can try to anti-meta the stuff, if that makes sense. But because there's no LL system, it is really, really difficult to commit to knowing who has been the problem children, effectively, of this format. And especially with people now taking a look at Enigma, with Enigma having a fridge behind her and the ability to pay 1 resource to swing 8 damage is a lot. And in a 20 health format, that's not easy to block out. That's not easy to keep tempo on. You effectively just have to give your whole hand and say, okay, cool, I'm going to hope you can't prevent my damage. And that's it. But if we added an LL system into Commoner, or probably more preferred amongst the community, because I don't want people to LL in Commoner. I feel like that's not, there's no legends in Commoner outside of the folks who win these events, right? So at least I think a rotating season would be cool to see. Just certain heroes that had won Commoner Gold Foil events from set X coming out to set Y coming out. Those heroes are rotating out of the format, and then you have a new slew of heroes to choose from, right? You've got the new heroes that will come out in a new set, and then you will also see those heroes back in the next format, but you'll at least have an off format where they won't be as prevalent. I'm curious if that's going to be something that we could see, but at the end of the day, it is a very, very, it's a hard ask from a company, right? Because the company, frankly, is worried far more about their draft and how they run draft and how they build sets around draft, and then also how they keep Classic Constructed fun and entertaining and competitive, because that's their baby. That's what's currently making them money. Commoner is not going to make them money. And so Commoner is not something that they need to put all of their focus into. I know there are a couple folks in there that do care about Commoner and that this is their their most favored format, but it is not a strictly a thing of the company to make that happen. And I feel like hopefully we can get some sort of Commoner committee on the line there, get people to kind of go over what Commoner events, get some people into interviews of Commoner gold foil events and say, how did you feel about this? Did you think this was fair? Were there other things in which it felt super one-sided and you didn't feel like you were actually playing Flesh and Blood? Did you have a good time? Was Commoner very interesting and insightful, and has it become one of your favorite formats? There are things we can ask people who play Commoner, and we don't ever see them. I hope to, at some point here, reach out to several Commoner gold foil winners and have them on the Common Language podcast to talk a bit about their win and about their experience in Commoner, because that's great. I want to learn more about people and their experiences in competitive Commoner, but what do we do about the problem children heroes that exist in the format? And is there anything that we can do? Right? Another thing that I thought about bringing up as a topic was more strict bans. Kind of really just seeing exactly where the issues lie. Is Fate Foreseen okay, but Sink Below not okay? Do we get to keep Blade Beckoner equipment? It's just significantly better Iron Rot. Do we get to keep Blade Beckoner equipment? Does Aether Ice Vein need to be banned from Icelander? Right? What are the things that we as a community can bring up to LSS and say, hey, this format I feel is not as prevalent, and they want to play it more, but because they've only seen Ira and Icelander at the top two tables for the past 3 years, where can changes be made to make the game more accessible for other heroes? Because like I said, you have heroes that just do not have a chance. And while we see the game continue to grow, I do not want to wait until set 25 for Bolton to get good charge cards. I do not want to have to wait until set 37 for Vincent to be able to get something even slightly akin to Deathly Whale in common. There are these things in which there's a lot of waiting. And it's waiting to see what cards are going to be reprinted in common, what new cards are going to be introduced in the common rarity slot in a new set for either a new class or an existing class, and how can they be utilized with the heroes that already exist? Because if Flesh and Blood's hero pool is going to continue to grow by 3 to 5 heroes nearly every set, we're expected to see a significant growth. Let's even just consider the minimum of 3, right? 3 heroes each set, 3 sets a year, 9 new heroes coming into Commoner, with no heroes rotating out, no heroes getting Living Legend, and the heroes that currently exist at the top tables just getting more and more powerful because of the cards that come out in these new sets. So where is the line? Is adding the rares going to be enough to where each hero kind of has their own theme and is able to truly bring about playing at their best ability? And then when they get new cards, they have new rares on top of new commons. You'll see some cool stuff in regards to just budget blitz things. I think that adding rares, if I'm going to choose one of these topics here, I think that adding rares is a great way to go about boosting the overall thematics of Commoner, as well as providing people the ability to play the hero they want to play and buy into, and still have it be incredibly inexpensive. There are not a lot of expensive rare cards. Frankly, I can't name many outside of I think looking for a scrap right now is $1. But there are not. I think LSS is well aware that the rares and the commons are both bulk rarity cards. So when you consider that, is there going to be something that we can do as a community to kind of give this information to LSS? And so that's kind of what I want to see. I want to see in the comments below, tell me what you feel you could change about Commoner. If you would like to see one thing changed about Commoner to make it a more enjoyable format for LGSs to run, for you yourself to even start running your own events, and more importantly, for you to be able to express yourself and enjoy the format in a competitive or casual sense, what would you do? Let me know in the comments down below. I'd be happy to hear from y'all. I really, really am passionate about Commoner, and I really want to make sure that this is a format that is widespread, taken on by the casual community as well as the competitive community, and is brought forth as something that we can all share as a lover of a budget format. You know, I think that if I were to go back to Magic the Gathering, I'd just be playing Pauper. And so, effectively, in the same vein, I'd be doing the exact same thing here, in which I want to make sure that if you are trying to get into Flesh and Blood and you can only afford $30 worth of stuff and you don't want to play Classic Constructed because you feel it's too sweaty and far too competitive, you can play Commoner. And that's what I would like to see out of it, at least. So, like I said, go ahead and let me know in the comments down below what you guys think about this. I'd be really, really curious to hear your thoughts. And then also, make sure to go ahead and hit the like button down below if you enjoyed this content. You can also subscribe to the channel as well. What are we at now? We're at 100 subscribers away from hitting 2,500 subs. So thank you guys so much for continuing to support the channel. It really does mean a lot. And I hope to continue getting more Commoner content out for you guys, whether it be gameplay, whether it be just the deep dive in the meta, whether it be interviews from people who have played in these Commoner events. Shoot, if you're an LGS that runs Commoner events, I would love to talk with you about that on the Common Language podcast as well when I do that. But this is not an episode of the Common Language podcast. This is just me proceeding to speak my voice on the internet in the hopes that I get to communicate with the rest of the community and continue to improve upon this game that we all love. So thank you all so much for watching. I do really appreciate it. And I hope you all continue to have fun in the Flesh and Blood. And I will see all of you beautiful Ashwings in our next video.